Now and then in our lives, we get a call and think this is the opportunity of a lifetime. Or we have this brilliant idea and we think this is going to make me the next self-made billionaire. Or someone from TEDx calls you and invites you to make a speech and you think, wow, I'll be a superstar, my speech will be seen by millions of people. I often wondered what kind of mindset and attitude helps people being lucky in life, seeing the opportunities and making radically innovative or creative concepts become successful. What happened, for example, in Alexander Fleming's mind when he discovered penicillin? He was a simple bacteriologist at St. Mary Hospital in London when he noticed some blue-green mold on one of his plate cultures of bacteria. He observed that the mold seemed to make the bacteria disappear. Intrigued, he stopped his other research projects and investigated the matter. But his contribution stopped with the publication of his research in 1929, and others turned it into a life-saving drug and a multi-billion pharmaceutical business called antibiotics. We have many crazy success stories where something rather mundane like basic computer language and MS-DOS made Bill Gates and Paul Allen the richest men on the planet, soon to be joined by people like Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Ma. But think about it. If you were already around in the 1990s, how many of us hadn't already thought about developing some sort of multimedia, social media platform, or maybe making an online shop? So why didn't you do it back then? Why don't you do it now? I would like to contend that we need to work on a self-conceptual level to be emotionally and cognitively ready for new opportunities, change and innovation. Let me first explain a few things. Simply put, the psychological self comprises all the beliefs and feelings a person has about him or herself. Now, the psychological identity can be understood as the internal processes integrating the individual's inner self and the external environment into a coherent whole. It means that whenever people encounter something new, it can be a new environment, a new idea, a different behavior, or a creative way of thinking. It can trigger them as it challenges their self-concept. I remember when people first came up with the smartphones about 20 years ago. Many rejected it and were opposed to it. Nowadays, many who opposed them in the first place spend now hours playing and using them every day. What about eating insects? There is more and more research available to support the idea that eating insects may be one of the best ways to sustain healthily future populations around the globe. About 2 million people in the world already do it, and yet most of the other 5 billion people in the world seem to have some issues with that because it challenges their conception of food. Does it mean that we should be early adopters and jump on everything that is new? Maybe not. But it means that we should stay open-minded and welcome challenges to our self-construct. Only by accepting challenges to our self-concept can we get emotionally strong enough to face drastic changes to our lives. Only by having sufficiently elaborate and diverse identity constructs can we adapt to change fast and painlessly enough to be amongst the frontrunners of innovation. Only by building up flexibility within our identity construct are we cognitively able to process change efficiently. A flexible identity constructs enable us to identify cognitive biases. So what are cognitive biases? Cognitive biases are mental simplifications helping to connect information, to identify opportunities, and to deal with hurdles in fast decision making. Decades of research have studied and documented almost 200 of these biases. Some of them are quite famous in management literature. I will now focus on 3 cognitive biases that have a direct effect on how we perceive, integrate, and process new things into our self-construct. That is perceptual blindness, cognitive dissonance, and the overconfidence bias. So the first cognitive bias is perceptual blindness. It makes us see what we focus on and what we expect to see. Maybe you have heard about this experiment Simmons and Chabris did in 1999, where participants were shown a video with people playing basketball and they are asked to count the passes. Suddenly, a gorilla walks among the players and most people don't notice him because they are so focused on the ball and counting the passes. The more difficult the task, the less chances there is to notice what is actually happening. That means that most people miss the obvious because they are so focused at looking for the expected that we miss the unexpected. If we miss something as huge as a gorilla on a basketball field, what about less obvious things just as a cat or a mouse? If we think now about those rare and barely visible opportunities in a complex environment that are the new billion-dollar businesses, it's like noticing a mosquito in the subway while you're playing Candy Crush on your smartphone. The second cognitive bias I want to talk about is called cognitive dissonance. It allows us to overcome emotional distress whenever we are faced with a painful dilemma or some challenges to our self-comfort. Leon Festinger showed 70 years ago that we were good at convincing ourselves that a perfectly meaningless, boring and redundant job is actually an interesting opportunity for self-growth. Especially when we are underpaid in comparison to having a fair wage, our brain tries to justify that choice with coming up with many good reasons why we accepted doing that in the first place. It means that if there's an opportunity sitting right in front of you, but it's risky, difficult, and most importantly challenges our current self-construct, we will find excuses for not doing it. We will find unconsciously reasons to procrastinate, facing the challenge head-on, even if that means paying a heavy price in the future. In my practice as a psychological counselor, I hear people saying, what about all these things that I need to do in everyday life? I need to go through my emails. I need to follow up on my chat conversations. All these cute applications that are designed to keep me busy with totally useless things, they just pop up and keep me busy. Beyond everyday tasks, we are good for making excuses for planning our lives. Oh, I'm so busy with my current job, but once I get this promotion, then I'm going to start my own business. Or, I'm busy with my kids right now, but once the kids are in college, then I'm going to write this best-selling book that I have always planned on writing. All I need is time, and I just want to have the right moment, the right time. The problem is this right time never happens. All those excuses are rationalizations your busy self makes up to keep you away from the scary stuff you're not yet used to and that you feel emotionally not ready for. Sometimes you need to step down from being your usual self. Let the present just sit here, untended, even if that means taking some short-term risk for your current version of self, and let things go in order to make real progress on life-changing endeavors. We resist acting on the life-changing stuff that never gets done because it doesn't feel as good as solving our current challenges, because it feels less urgent. But actually it's just too different from what we're used to. It seems too challenging and therefore terrifying. The third and last cognitive bias is maybe the trickiest one, the overconfidence bias. Is it good? Is it bad? Kruger and Dunning showed in another 1999 study that the less skilled you are, the less knowledge you have of your unskillfulness. So if you feel like you're a fraud in your job, and maybe you are totally overpaid for what you're doing, or you're not competent at what you're doing, you might actually be quite good at it. You might just maybe be lacking self-confidence. What does it tell us? Overconfidence leads to overestimations of one's own value and thus overestimations of one's accuracy. And it builds up unrealistic optimism and unrealistic risk assessment. Overconfidence has been blamed for high rates of entrepreneurial failure, the sinking of the Titanic, the nuclear accident at Chernobyl, the subprime mortgage crisis of 2008 and the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and many, many more other catastrophes. However, overconfidence has also caused 100% of self-made men, rock stars and movie stars to become who they are. Because to get where they are, they needed to believe into that 1 in a million chance that they were actually going to make it. It makes us believe that we can really make the impossible possible. We can paraphrase the biblical beware of false prophets into beware of false good new ideas. So how to differentiate the life-changing opportunity from the life-ruining trap? I would like to answer that giving 2 pieces of advice. Advice number 1, don't discard anything, even if it challenges your self-construct, your value and belief system. Our minds are not built to perceive and process all information objectively. There's a focus point that we can perceive and process, but for the rest our brain works with the assumption and the cognitive biases that reduce our intelligence and unconsciously protect our emotions. So never hesitate to take a step back and challenge yourself. What am I missing? Where is the gorilla in the room? What lie am I telling myself again to make me feel better? Be unbiased enough to look wherever other people aren't looking. Be open-minded and not judgmental enough to accept challenging what you held for certain. Advice number 2. Be self-confident enough to trust your own critical judgment. But don't be ashamed being wrong. Everybody has good ideas. But only few were outstanding and matured enough to become realistically doable. You can be a dreamer when it comes to create and innovate. But you need to be highly realistic and practical when it comes to implementation and related risk assessments. In conclusion, in order to succeed, you need to work on yourself to solve these 2 mental paradoxes. 1, having a flexible psychological self-construct that makes you emotionally strong enough to withstand identity threats coming through change, but bold or confident enough to persevere in what might seem a hopeless effort if you believe in it. The 2nd, you need a reasonable mind able to resist cognitive biases that will hold you back but is unreasonable enough to give in to overconfidence and take your chances realizing your dreams even if they seem unrealistic. Good luck for that, and thank you all for listening.